Welcome, guys. Welcome to another video of Minko's Corner. I hope you have a great day. In today's video, we're continuing our series on the conquest of India. I don't know that much about it. Basically, nothing about the conquest of India. The only thing I know is, the popular facts, the East Indian companies, and all that. But this is a completely new type of history that I haven't learned or I haven't really paid any attention to, and it's very interesting. Um, and I hope you learn it as much as I did. Let's go.
Bombay, April 1619. The British, the future leaders of a global empire, the one-day masters of a domain upon which the sun never set, the soon-to-be rulers of millions of subjects, were cowering in a tiny fortified city on the coast of India. What remained of the East India Company in the subcontinent had been under siege in Bombay for almost a year and a half. Most of the company's garrison, along with a good number of civilians, were dead from enemy attacks, starvation, or bubonic plague. And who were the architects of this British embarrassment? Another great European power, perhaps? Maybe a resurgent Mongol Empire? Nope. It was the Mughal Empire, using a collection of freelance Afro-Indian former slaves to absolutely wreck the British Empire in India. Oh yeah, we're a long way from the Raj, folks. Thanks so much to World Anvil for helping us forge today's historical tale. In the previous episode, we talked a lot about the big historical paradox that is Britain's conquest of India. The thing is, on the way to reaching that big paradox, there's actually a lot of other smaller, though no less confusing paradoxes. The first of which in this long story involves the East India Company, which began operation in 1600. Now, if you've only heard about one early modern company, the East India Company is probably it, because the EIC is a key player in a lot of important events, including the American Revolution, and as a result, it's featured in a lot of historical fiction set in this period. For instance, like a surprisingly popular film franchise based on a pirate-themed amusement park ride. Barbossa stands what? Now, in the popular retellings of East India Company history, there's a lot of focus on the company's dealings in the Caribbean and America and England, but one key area of the company's work is usually left out, which is pretty weird when you think about it because it's kind of right in the name. India. You see, the whole reason the EIC was founded to begin with was to establish trade with India, because the British wanted India's spices, silks, and textiles. But they weren't the only Europeans trying to grab Indian goods, and they most definitely...
There were, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're about to learn here. I think there were the Dutch and East India companies. I think there were French ones, Spanish ones, and we'll see if I'm correct.
We're not the first. That honorific would go to the Portuguese. Their interest in India led to their famous exploration of the Cape of Good Hope at the end of the 15th century, where they reached India in 1498 to discover a sophisticated economy managed by the Mughal Empire. And as other Europeans would soon discover, this economy simply had no use for European trading goods. The best the Portuguese could manage were a small set of coastal trading stations, called factories, which were allowed to exist only with the permission of the regional Mughal leaders. Even so, by the mid-16th century, the Portuguese were the European power in the Indian Ocean, even though that power was still insignificant when compared to the Mughal.
Dude, the guy's extremely biased with the Indians. I mean, every time, we're a long way away from it.
Empire. And in order to extract any sort of wealth or commodities out of India, the Portuguese were forced to run up a huge trade deficit, trading the gold and silver transported from the New World in exchange for Indian goods. The situation wasn't much different for the Dutch, who began to push out the Portuguese by the end of the 1500s, improving on the Portuguese' situation through better organization. Because while the Portuguese relied on the guile and ability of individual traders to establish factories, the Dutch developed a corporation to create a more lasting and profitable foothold in the region.
Okay, hold on a minute, Buster. Why are we talking so much about the Dutch and the Portuguese? Wasn't this a story of the British East India Company?
Well, you see, Army, there's a common phrase historians have for talking about this period of history. Anything the British are famous for doing, the Dutch did first, and often better. Long before the Spanish Armada threatened England, Protestants in the Netherlands fended off wave after wave of attack from the Spanish Empire. Long before the English Civil War brought republicanism to Parliament, the Dutch Republic created a thriving state built around political and religious freedom, and long before the East India Company entered popular historical fiction, the United Dutch East India Company dominated the global trade in silks, spices, and textiles. More commonly referred to as the VOC, they combined several different East India companies into one large megacorporation. because colonialism in this era was a high-risk, high-reward venture. Individual states could sponsor new colonies or trading opportunities, but if things went wrong, which they often did, the state could be bankrupt and ripe for conquest. See Scotland in the Darien Scheme. Colonial companies,
The Darien Scheme? What was that about?
however, offered states the opportunity to get involved
I've
in the age
never
of
heard
discovery
about that.
without taking on that type of risk. In other words, companies like the EIC or VOC were created for the exact same reason companies are created today: to take advantage of emerging opportunities while also focusing on the two most important words in business: limit liability. Nobles, merchants, bankers, and other investors in the early modern era could buy stocks in these types of companies in order to grab a share of lucrative international
No
trade.
way.
And if things went wrong, they could lose a lot of money, sure, but they likely wouldn't be left penniless. The VOC, however, didn't lose much money, and by the mid-17th century, they were the richest corporation in the world, maintaining an impressive military force that included 150 merchant ships, 40 warships, and 10,000 soldiers. Oh my gosh, please nobody tell Daddy Bezos this sort of thing has a historical precedent. In addition to trading commodities,
Oh,
the
that's
VOC
coming, that's
also
coming.
offered their fleet and troops to local rulers in India and Indonesia to sweeten trade deals or to offer temporary support for regional wars. So, the VOC was a profit-making company, but wielded power like a state. So you know that darkest timeline dominated by transnational corporations that we fear will one day become a reality? Well, sadly, humanity has both been there and done that long ago. So, given this strength, why didn't the Dutch and the VOC dominate India? Well, because they lost interest and focused on Indonesia instead. See, from the city of Jakarta, they could monopolize the greatest prize in the early modern era: the trade in Asian spices. India was worthwhile, no doubt, but the Mughal Empire's strength posed a significant barrier to the VOC's ability to extract.
Okay, so let me get, as you said, the paradoxes that will somehow happen for England to take over India must be insane, because if you're a company like the VOC who has so much money, so much wealth, you have fucking an army under you, you have warships, you have trade ships, and even you are apprehensive about doing trade in India because of the Mughal Empire and its strength and its power. And you're like, you know what? We're going to Java. We're going to Indonesia. Then what must have happened that the English were able to, take over India?
Wealth. Whereas in Indonesia, the Dutch could dominate trade while maintaining an easier relationship with the disparate kingdoms of the archipelago. So when the East India Company finally got its act together and established their own factories along the coast of India in the mid-1600s, they weren't so much competing with the VOC as taking the Dutch's leftovers. The tough, hard-to-eat leftovers. And when the British attempted to step out of line and introduce themselves into Indonesia, the Dutch retaliated swiftly and brutally. On Ambon Island in 1623, the Dutch rounded up and tortured a small group of EIC agents who had hired Japanese Ronin to spy on VOC positions on the island. After a forced...
They hired Japanese Ronin? Are you kidding me? This is so cool. They hired Ronin samurais to spy on positions, and then they tortured. What's this, man? This is real, some business wars.
Confession, the leader of the EIC agents, Gabriel Towerson, was beheaded and
Oh
had
my
his
God.
head impaled on a pole as an example to other British traders considering the same thing. So, the situation with
hell?
the Dutch meant that the British were left trying to pry money out of India, which could only be done based on trade agreements dictated by the Mughal state. And when the British balked at these agreements, as they did during the Anglo-Mughal War, they were once again swiftly and brutally dealt with by the Mughal Empire, as you saw with the Siege of Bombay from the beginning of this episode. Despite the EIC's resources and a collection of warships sent by the Crown to assist in the endeavor, the British were soundly defeated in this war
what
and
happened?
were temporarily expelled from their factories along the coast. And in order to gain readmittance to India, the EIC had to admit fault for the war, pay local Indian merchants for seized goods and ships, and hand over a huge indemnity of millions of dollars in today's money to the Mughal Empire for the inconvenience. And finally, in a true show of weakness, EIC representatives were forced to prostrate themselves on the floor and beg for forgiveness at the feet of Emperor Aurangzeb during
I bet the English will remember that.
the public ceremony. Ooh boy, pretty bad, huh? Well, don't forget to add to the mixture the French, who by the end of the 17th century had established their own factories on the coast of India.
I know about
That's
that.
right, yet another bully was lining up to take a crack at the faltering British.
Okay, so why is this series called The Conquest of India? Doesn't really seem like that's happening, you know?
Don't worry, Army. We'll get there. I think. Oh man,
Okay, so the next episode is gonna be the fall of the Mughal Empire, which I'm gonna guess. This is my guess prediction. It's gonna be internal. It's gonna be some civil war. I doubt it that the British or any other nation from Europe would be able to, take it over. I think it will be greed and internal strife that will make away with the Mughal Empire. Well, like most empires, it's internal. It's never external. It's very difficult for a monolithic empire that controls a whole continent to be defeated by an enemy because who's gonna defeat it? No, it's gonna be internal, like it always is. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. It was pretty short, I get it, but I hope you learned as much as I did. It was pretty interesting. I remember the logo for the VOC. I remember seeing it before. I knew it was for an East India company. I didn't know it for the Dutch one. I thought it was for the English one. But it was very interesting seeing how why the Dutch were not in India because their corporation was so much more powerful and so much more wealthy. Well, it was because they went to Indonesia, so that makes sense. Um, but then I'm very curious to see what happens because England, as he said in the beginning, is such a small nation. It's like this one little half of an island, even. And they were able to conquer a whole continent. Like, what must have happened? Like, how many times must things have gone in their favor where they weren't supposed to go in their favor for them to be able to conquer a whole continent, a subcontinent of India? I mean, it must have been insane. Uh, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like, subscribe. I don't like to do this, but makes me my heart flutters when people subscribe and like. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys next time. See ya.